So now we are going to have a lesson on the rest of the digestive system. So this will cover the role of the small intestine, and that's a whole page, so that must do a lot of things, and the large intestine, and the maybe a little bit about the accessory organs attached to those two structures. So when we last left digestion, we were talking about chyme. Chyme is basically it's vomit. It's partially digested food that is the end of what comes out of the stomach and what goes into the small intestine. Uh, when it goes into the small intestine, the small intestine has two roles. First, it's going to finish digestion, right? So the mouth does a little bit, the stomach does a little bit, and then everything finishes in the small intestine. The small intestine uh, takes the nutrient food molecules and it breaks it down into monomers, right? So it will break down carbohydrates into monosaccharides, like glucose. It will take lipids and break them down into fatty acids and glycerol. And it will take proteins and break the proteins down into amino acids. And all of these monomers are small enough to be absorbed in the next step. So the first step is to finish digesting, all right, and turn everything into monomers. The second step is to absorb the monomer molecules and put them in the bloodstream so that the circulatory system can take them around to all of the different parts of the body. Your small intestine has three parts. The first part is called the duodenum. Sometimes I hear this pronounced duodenum, and that's fine too. Okay. So duodenum or duodenum, it doesn't really matter. It is the first part of the small intestine after the stomach. And this is where partially digested food mixes with bile from the liver to digest fats. So we've started carbohydrates, we've started proteins, right? Carbohydrates start in the mouth, proteins start in the stomach, and fats start in the duodenum, in the small intestine. Fats and water, as we know, they don't mix, right? Because fats are hydrophobic and water is hydrophilic. So normally fats don't like to mix with water, but bile is a special kind of chemical called an emulsifier. And an emulsifier takes some fat and some water and allows them to mix together, right? So it's going to break down the fat into very small droplets and allow it to mix with water. Um, the chyme also mixes with digestive enzymes from the pancreas. There are three digestive enzymes. There's actually more than that, but we're simplifying this. Okay. There's protease. Protease allows you to digest proteins. That kind of makes sense, right? Because you can see the PROT, the prot part of both words, right? So protease will allow you to digest proteins. Amylase will allow you to digest starches, right? Um, amylose is a 4 glucose starch molecule, right? A polysaccharide. That's the one that we saw in our gizmo that had 4 glucoses, right? So an amylose is really a type of starch. So amylase will help you digest amylose. And then you have lipase that allows you to digest fats. Because remember, lipids are fats. So it makes sense that lipase will help you digest lipids. Your small intestine has something called villi. Villi are finger like projections that increase the surface area of the small intestine to absorb nutrients. Do we see the villi on the next page? Yeah. So this is what the inside of your small intestine looks like. It has these little fingers that go in and they increase the surface area of the cells, right? So they increase the amount of cell membrane, which increases the amount of food that your intestine can absorb, right? That it can take in. Okay. So villi, they increase the surface area of the small intestine to absorb nutrients. Then you have the second part of your small intestine. It's your jejunum, and it continues digesting and absorbing nutrients. And then you have your ileum. By the time the food gets to your ileum, it's already 100% digested. So this ileum just finishes absorbing the food monomers, right? So fats, remember, break down into fatty acids and glycerol. Starches break down into glucose, and proteins break down into amino acids. Okay. While your food is in the small intestine, so remember the small intestine is part of your digestive tract. Um, the food in your small intestine is getting help from the accessory organs. Okay, so there are three accessory organs that help food digest while it's in the small intestine. Remember, accessory organs are not a part of the digestive tract. Food does not pass through them. So food does not pass through your liver. But what your liver does is it produces bile. And bile is a chemical that aids in the chemical digestion of fats. Your gallbladder holds the bile until you eat something fatty, right? Until it's needed in the small intestine. And your pancreas, digestive enzymes, the protease, the amylase, and the lipase that are used in the small intestine. So these three accessory organs help the digestion of foods in the small intestine, but the food doesn't pass through any of them. They just make enzymes and other chemicals that aid in chemical digestion. Okay, so we're getting to the end of the digestive system. Now we have the large intestine. And we're going to compare the large intestine to the small intestine. The small intestine is actually longer, but it's smaller in diameter. So the circle opening is smaller in the small intestine and bigger in the large intestine. But the large intestine is not as long, it's shorter. The small intestine helps you digest and absorb nutrients, but the large intestine only absorbs nutrients. The small intestine absorbs glucose, fatty acids, and amino acids, and the large intestine absorbs water and minerals. The small intestine contains digestive enzymes because it does digesting. The large intestine contains bacteria that helps you break down undigested food. So if your food is not digested in your small intestine, if you don't absorb all of the nutrients from it, then the bacteria in your large intestine use it for food. And bacteria digest things differently than humans, right? So we break down everything into monomers, and then the monomers go to our cells, and our cells turn them into energy, and then our cells release carbon dioxide, and we breathe it out. Bacteria, when they digest food, they break it down, and their waste product is methane. Methane is a gas. So if your bacteria are doing a lot of digesting, there will be this methane gas that builds up in your large intestine, and then you have to get rid of the gas. So that's where farts come from. right? So if you um, have a type of food that you can't digest well, that means usually you get bloating. And that's because of the bacteria. They're doing the digesting for you. So they're taking the energy from the food that you can't digest, and their waste product is methane gas. And then that builds up and you feel bloated, or you uh, eliminate it through the process of farting, of flatulence. Okay, here is a picture of your lower part of your digestive system. So you can see the small intestine is in the middle, and the large intestine wraps around it. Uh, right at the juncture of the small intestine and the large intestine, you have a little pouch. It's called the appendix. Maybe some of you have had this removed. It doesn't do anything. It actually stores bacteria. And we used to need more bacteria when our diet wasn't like hot dogs and hamburgers and cookies and donuts, right? When we ate more raw like plant food, we needed this to help digest our like caveman diet. We don't need it anymore, and sometimes the bacteria can cause inflammation in our intestines, and then sometimes we need to get our appendix removed because it's infected and it doesn't do anything, so it should come out. So small goes through the small intestine first, which is in the middle. Okay, then it goes through the large intestine, and you can see the large intestine has a bigger opening, right? It's thicker. And then the what's left, right, is your feces, and that gets stored in your rectum, and then it comes out your anus. And that's the end of the digestive system, right? So we have some pictures here that you should notice. We talked about the villi and the small intestine. You can also see the small intestine has very many muscle layers, and that's to continue squeezing food through the tube. And then you can see how the different organs of the digestive system are related to one another. So here we can see the small intestine. Here we have the duodenum, okay? And you can see the duodenum um, has a has a tube coming out of it, and that tube goes to the pancreas, right? So we have the pancreatic duct, which is a tube from the small intestine to the pancreas, and that's where all of your enzymes come from. So your pancreas makes your enzymes and delivers it to your small intestine. And you can also see there's a duct coming from your gallbladder. So remember, your liver makes the bile. The bile gets stored in your gallbladder, and then it's connected via a tube called a bile duct into your small intestine, right? And we want to keep these ducts clear so that the enzymes in the bile can make it to your small intestine. Sometimes they get clogged up, and it can make people very sick. So that is the end of your digestive system. And then we will have a lesson on, of course, digestive diseases and disorders.